Yeah, that was a good introduction. That's what I do. I'm a litigator, so there's basically two types of attorneys. There's the litigators who are in court all the time, and then there's the transactional attorneys that are never in court, get scared of court, but spend a lot of time drafting paperwork, working with companies that are merging together. I work in a firm right now that's does a little bit of everything. So we have half of us are litigators and half of us are transactional attorneys, and there's just like a constant war. They think we're crude and crazy, and we think they're boring and don't do anything but sit at their desks all day. So, but it's good to know that there's different areas of the law for those that are interested in it, because sometimes your natural abilities don't lead towards public speaking and being in front of juries and judges and things like that, but that doesn't mean you can't still go to law school and be a lawyer. You're just going to be what I say is in the boring side of the practice and pushing paper, lots of paper. Although I push a lot of paper myself, so I'm not sure there's much of a difference. I, like Whitney said, I did my undergrad at Utah State. My undergrad was in sociology and social work, which is basically a degree that probably some of you are going to have, which means you have to go to grad school, because there's really not much you can do with either one of those degrees without grad school. And so I was deciding between psychology and law school, and started working for Salt Lake Legal Defenders, who is a group that practices in indigent criminal defense in Salt Lake County. And I really got interested in practicing law. I thought I would be a criminal defense attorney, and now I'm a commercial litigator. So things changed. I'm sure many of you have changed your major 5 times by now, and you should all know that that's okay. It happens. So I thought I would just sort of go through myths that I've seen on TV. I'm really not the most knowledgeable about law TV programs, because when I watch them, it gives me a ton of anxiety, because I just think about all the things I should be doing and not watching TV. But there's a few that I'm at least aware of, and I thought we could go through some of them. So the first myth that I thought about was Legally Blonde, when Elle Woods gets into, I think, Harvard, right? Harvard, by making a video of herself in a bikini and talking about Days of Our Lives. So that's really not how you get into law school. Law school is, you have to have a bachelor's degree, and then you have to go through an application process. So I pulled up the You's application process, because that's the one I know about. And I'll walk you through all the things that you should think about if you're going to go to law school. But I also pulled up the things that you have to do to go to law school. So the first is you have to take the LSAT. Has anyone heard of the LSAT or the GRE or any of those? LSAT is the one for law school. And the LSAT is basically focused in 3 areas. You have to do, one part is reading comprehension, the second part is logical reasoning, and the last part is analytical reasoning. I honestly have blocked the LSAT, so I actually had to look up what 3 parts of the tests I took. One part is games. It's like, you really just have to be really good at games. It's kind of silly to think that you're getting into law school by learning how to play, like, if there's 3 colors and one is by green, and there's a person standing by green and red and blue, how many people are standing by purple? I mean, it's just kind of crazy. So you'll learn all those games, and you'll take the LSAT. And I was looking to see what sort of the average ranges were for the LSAT and your GPA. And I looked at the University of Utah and Brigham Young. Brigham Young University is ranked. I don't want you to think that BYU is not ranked. They are. I don't know why the U.S. News Report has them like that. I think that, but I will say, because I went to the University of Utah, we are higher than BYU. So
talking about a bureaucracy.
So for BYU, they say the average LSAT score is 161. Now, the LSAT score, it ranks from the averages between 120, and the highest you can get is 180. BYU claims that their median LSAT score is 161 and their median, and the U's median LSAT score is 155. I'm really not sure that's quite accurate. I mean, it's a median score, and so obviously you have, when you apply for law school, many people apply to like 10 law schools. And you kind of, you know, Harvard might be your dream, and then you kind of go down from there to see where you kind of can get in. And I would be surprised, and the law schools always hide what the average LSAT score is for the students that actually accept, because they want to look like they're really amazing and they only take the top tier. But so I always tell people that, because I don't think, some people take the LSAT, like one of my assistants took the LSAT recently, and she was really discouraged about her score and thought she couldn't get in anywhere. And I thought, you know, you need to apply. They're trying, I don't know why, they're trying to scare you out of applying. So just apply. The next thing is the median GPA. That's the same thing. I analyze it the same way. It's the median. It's not the average of the people that are actually accepted into either one of those schools. You obviously need to work hard and have good grades to go to law school. You're not going to get into any law school if you're in a, you know, in the 2.0 and range. You need to be up a B, you know, B+ and up to get into law school. Whitney knew me in undergrad. I had a little bit too much fun my first year of undergrad and spent the next 3 years trying to fix my first year of undergrad. So know that you can fix grades by, if you're interested in law school, by retaking classes and sort of figuring out what you're passionate about. I'm sure that's really a class for another day, is trying to find what you're passionate about. Because when you start working, you're gonna want to find something that you really do enjoy. Also, since I'm a lawyer and all I do is get interrupted by judges all day, if you guys have any questions, it really doesn't bother me to ask questions right now. So the next thing I pulled up is just what you have to do to apply. And this is the application checklist for the U. The BYU's was similar, and most law schools are similar. So you obviously have to apply. That's a lot like what you did to get into Salt Lake Community College. You have to take the LSAT. You're going to want to take that a few months before you apply. The LSAT score is a little bit weird, because I don't know if you guys had to take ACTs and SATs, but you know how if you really bomb your ACT, you can retake it? You can't really do that with the LSAT. You can retake it, but then they average the scores. So it's really important, if you are interested in taking the LSAT, to take it really seriously the first time around. You also have to write a personal statement. I actually wrote my personal statement about being a slacker my first year of college and having to kind of get busy and do what I needed to do to go to graduate school. But, you know, it's just a couple 3 or 4 or 5 page essay about, you know, the hardships in your life, what you've accomplished, how you've overcome them. We all have them, so it's not terribly hard. If any of you ever do a personal statement and want me to look at it, send it my way, because I had people look at mine, and I'm quite certain that other people's edits got me into law school. Other things you have to do is have a letter of recommendation. So a good thing for all of you guys as you're in your undergrad is to build relationships with your professors, with other administrators on campus, under other people in professions outside of the college, because you are going to need them if you want to go to grad school. Whitney and I had a colleague, I'm sure Tiffany Evans wrote many letters of recommendation for you. She wrote mine. She was my advisor in undergrad, and I really encourage you guys to build relationships, because you're never going to wish you hadn't done that. I know my advisors, I had 2. I had a professor in my major, and then Tiffany, who advised us in some leadership stuff at Utah State. They probably got me into law school with their letter of recommendation, and I know even now I can call them and ask them for help. So I hope you are using your your assets, and I hope you're bothering Whitney because she owes people, so I can tell you that you can definitely bother her. The second myth, you're not going to learn how to get away with murder in law school. Law school is kind of an interesting degree. Law is an interesting degree because it's not like nursing, or my husband's a teacher. You can graduate with your nursing degree and you do know how to be a nurse. You obviously have a learning curve, but you know how to be a nurse. You know how to be a teacher. You know how to organize lesson plans. Law school teaches you how to think like a lawyer, but it does not teach you anything about being a lawyer. The minute you walk out, you graduate, you're gonna study for 2 months for the bar exam. You're gonna block all of that from your mind, and you're gonna start your practice, and you're not gonna know what you're doing. It's a very interesting way to start working. I think historically, when I've read about sort of the historical, how you became lawyers in even the 1800s, you always trained under another lawyer. And that's just still kind of how it is today. I know that because of the marketplace, some I call them kids now, but some kids graduate from law school and they have to put out their shingle, and I think that's really scary because there's no way they could know what they're doing. And that's why you kind of see on TV these firms developed where you have kind of, I call them baby attorneys. Baby attorneys, and then teenage attorneys, and then the ones who actually know what they're doing, who've been practicing for 30 years, and you just kind of train under them as your practice goes. In law school, you read a bunch of cases, like cases from the 1800s all the way to the current Supreme Court session, and you just kind of learn to spot issues, spot analysis, learn how to see both sides of an issue. I think that's probably one thing that law school really does teach you, as opposed to other degrees, is really how to at least be aware of both sides of an issue. Because you never know in the practice of law. I had one client in my office yesterday where I'm arguing one side for them, and then that morning I had another client in my office with a similar problem, but just on the other side, and I have to argue the other side for that client. So when you're in law school, that's all you're really doing is learning how to think better like that, being more aware of that there's always two sides. There's always two sides to every story. I always think my side's right, but there are two sides. And I always think I'm right even when I'm arguing both sides for different clients. Myth number 3, you can have a social life in law school. Have you guys seen that How I Met Your Mother? Anybody watch How I Met Your Mother? I love that show, but I always thought, Marshall, that's not real life. You don't just go hang out at the bar all day with your friends when you're in law school. You really do have to study a lot. I remember this episode where they were all at the bar and he had to be up studying, and he was saying, on a Friday night, being a lawyer better be awesome. Being a lawyer is awesome, but it's not always awesome. And law school takes a lot of studying. It's not, I don't think, unlike other degrees. I know medical school, you're going to be studying a lot. In law school, it really is a full-time job. They don't want you to have a job your first year of law school. In fact, some law schools prohibit it. You're basically studying 9 to 5, and then finals week. I mean, it is your job. It is your job. And then in law school, unlike how I'm assuming it is for you guys now, you get one test, and that's your grade. So you take criminal law, you're there all semester, you take one grade, or you take one test at the end, and that's your grade. You don't get another shot, you don't get to beg your teacher to let you do it again. That's just not how law school works. So that's why you kind of have to treat it like it's a full-time job, because that couple of weeks of law school, there are literally people crying in the halls sometimes. I remember my constitutional law exam, one of the guys got up from the back row and said, and it was the end of our 1L year, I don't know I'll have to look as to why they call it that, but law school, you're 1L, you're 2L, or you're 3L.
It's bureaucracy. It's the numbering system.
So it was the end of so you take constitutional law, the end of your 1L year, and he turned in his con law exam and said, okay, well, I won't see you next year as I will be back in my 1L classrooms again. So, but I found that if anyone is going to go to law school, that as long as you're studying that, if you really take it seriously like a job during the regular year or the regular part of the year, I didn't think the exam portion was as horrible as I thought it was when I first learned, because I was unlike most people. I never had a class like this, someone telling me how to go to law school. So I literally went into law school knowing absolutely nothing. I was shocked as anyone else that I only got one test at the end of the semester to learn how to and do everything I needed to do. So yeah, it's not great, but you got to do it. And it's interesting because after you get your examinations done, your 1L year, that actually is how you get your job your second year. Grades are very important through law school. When you graduate from law school and get your first job, they don't matter anymore, just like they won't matter anymore when you guys are done with undergrad. Myth number 4, you don't need law school to be a lawyer. I don't watch Suits. Like I told you, it gives me anxiety. But I guess the premise of this show is a guy never went to law school, and he's like this amazing lawyer, and that's how he's practicing. You do need to go to law school. Interestingly, there's a couple of states where you actually don't, but you do if you want to stay in Utah. So I know California is one. I feel like New York is one, where you don't have to go to law school, you just have to pass the bar exam. And that's why I think part of why their pass rate is so low, because they have some people who think, oh, I'll take the bar exam without ever having to go to law school. So to be a lawyer in Utah, I just got this off the, or I got some information off the bar website, because again, I've blocked this part of my life as well. You have to have gone to an ABA accredited law school. So there are several schools not in Utah. So if you want to go to U or BYU, they're ABA accredited and you don't need to worry about it. But California, I know, has some. New York, some of the schools back east have some where they're not ABA accredited, which means they're not approved by the American Bar Association. So if you go to those schools, you won't be able to practice in Utah if you pass the bar. Those schools, if I would do anything I could to get into an ABA approved law school, just because the pass rate for those schools that are not ABA approved are pretty low. That's why they're not ABA approved. So to me, you would have spent a lot of money for very little. And law school is expensive. I think the cost of going to law school in Utah is a lot cheaper than other places. I know I have a couple of friends who graduated with over $100,000 in law school debt, and you'll graduate with less than half of that if you're going to go to school in state. The other thing you have to do is you can't have really broken the law. We do really strict background checks, the bar does, before you can take the bar, before you're even allowed to sit for the bar. You have to have FBI fingerprinting, you have to have a full background check, you have to identify every ticket you ever got. I know I forgot to identify one in Idaho and couldn't sleep for 3 days after I realized what I had done. So you know, that's yet another reason why we should, you don't want to do stupid things while you're young, because it can affect what your choices are as you go through school. I know just in my career, I have defended on occasion, I don't do much criminal law, but on occasion I've helped people, mostly doing pro bono, defend against, silly fights, silly bar fights, silly fight with a family member, exorbitant speeding tickets that have created problems for them in other areas when they wanted to go to nursing school, for example, when they wanted to go to law school, when they wanted to go to medical school. So you have to live a clean life if you're wanting to go into any profession where they're going to do strict background checks. He asked me if I had to defend someone who I knew was a bad person, if I'd go ahead and defend them. So my answer to that question probably comes more from my work at Legal Defenders, even before law school, and that is it's hard. It's hard, but I think the people who do mostly criminal defense work have the mindset that the way our Constitution works is that you're innocent until you're proven guilty. And so it's not for the person who did something wrong to prove that they really did something wrong. It's for the state or the county or the city, depending on the level of the crime, to prove that that person did the crime. So in my experience, you're as a criminal defense attorney, you're really just focused on making sure that the Constitution does what it's supposed to do to protect all of us. And sometimes that means you're defending people that you might have a feeling that they either did what they're being accused of or maybe did other things that you don't know about. But I think that that's where I have always focused on, is it's my job in a criminal defense action to protect, the Constitution, protect this particular witness, and sometimes you do have to do hard things. That being said, it's one of the reasons I don't do criminal law, because I think it's hard. It's one of the reasons I don't. I thought I'd be a guardian ad litem. That's an attorney for kids in cases where they're getting taken away from their families and things like that. I always thought that that would sort of be a good fit for me. But when I started working, I didn't think I thought that would be really hard. I didn't think I'd be able to put it.
It's not an easy job.
Yeah, I didn't think I'd be able to sleep at night. So then I went into commercial litigation and can't sleep because I still worry about my clients the same way. So it really didn't make any difference. Let's see, you also have to pass an ethics exam. So you have to actually, we always hear that like attorneys are so, bloodsuckers are not all that ethical. And I think part of that comes from the question that you just asked. How can you defend? I have very close friends who prosecute murderers and defend murderers. And it's always good to put the bad guy behind bars, but at the same time, I think the mentality of making sure that all of our rights are protected are what keep the criminal defense attorneys working. My father-in-law bought a lawyer joke book and spends endless amounts of time telling me lawyer jokes, so I think I've mostly heard all of them. Let's see, and then once you're a member of the bar, we have disbarments every single month. We get a magazine, actually, of people who've been disbarred because they've broken the rules of ethics. So, and to me, when you're probably still owing on your student loans, being disbarred because you forgot to put money in the right trust account, we have to keep our client money separate from our operating accounts. Or didn't respond to telephone calls from clients, or didn't do what we're supposed to do, is a real shame. That being said, being a lawyer, I'm probably not in the best spot right now in my practice to be like saying being a lawyer is awesome. Being a lawyer is incredibly stressful, especially a litigator. We have deadlines that we can get sued for if we miss. My calendar, I have to check constantly to make sure I'm not missing hearings, deadlines for briefing. We have, if you're filing an appellate brief, those are briefs that go to the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court, and you miss a deadline like that, the appeal's over and you're going to get sued and probably disbarred. So it's a stressful life, and I think if you want to be a lawyer, there's many good things about it. You're very often doing, especially in litigation, you're very often doing new things all the time. There was a case when Whitney was talking about my bio, there was a time in my life where I knew everything there was to know about diesel brakes. Everything to know about diesel brakes, because there was a lawsuit over a diesel that didn't brake properly, and the driver and the owner of the company were blaming the manufacturer of the diesel brakes on how how they design the brakes. So I go from diesel brakes, I go to, I just swing wide. I've done bike helmets from product liabilities. I've done seat belts for cars. And then my next case will be a commercial case where, two brothers are best friends their whole life, and now they hate each other. And we're trying to figure out how to split up companies. So there is that with the practice of the law, and unless you're doing like simply criminal, then you're always going to be doing criminal cases, or just divorce, you're only going to be doing divorce cases. But even then, there's always something new in each case. So those are probably the good things about the practice of the law. Myth number 5 is that you're going to be rich. That's not true. I don't want to say that being a lawyer isn't a good way to make a living. You are you have a graduate degree, so you're obviously going to be making more than someone with I would say, regular job with either not a degree or an undergraduate degree. Obviously, we have those entrepreneurs that are like, extreme in any situation. I represent clients who have absolutely no education and are making a lot of money, and I wish, why couldn't I think of, making that? But I thought it would be interesting to sort of see what the median salary is and the mean salary is for attorneys across the country. So Utah's kind of at the middle, I guess. The mean wage, which is right in the middle, not the average, is anywhere between 106 to 115. I actually think that's, wait, am I looking at that right? The colors look weird on here. I actually think that's a little bit high, and so I went to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the law school, and after graduating, they're estimating the mean to be closer to 70 to 80,000. It's again another lecture as to why this one is lower than this one, but I'll save that for another time. Whitney wants me to come and talk. Myth 7, practicing law is glamorous. The most glamorous TV show I could think was Ally McBeal, but I was thinking, you guys, do you even know what that is? Right? I mean, you guys are, there was this show in the 90s.
Dancing Baby.
Yeah, there was a Dancing Baby, yeah. With the law firm, all the women used to, I remember watching parts of it, all the women used to meet in the bathroom and talk about all the boys in the office. Yeah, it's really not all that glamorous. I found this meme when I was looking yesterday, but it just perfectly describes how everybody has a different view of lawyers. My parents really do think that I practice in the courtroom all the time and am just amazing. Most of the public has the lawyer jokes that thinks that we're dishonest. My clients are never happy because I have many clients and I cannot just work on one client's case 24/7. Quite frankly, if they got my bill at the end of a month, if I only worked on their case, they would be really upset. What my spouse thinks I do, yeah, that is pretty accurate. I have an awesome spouse, but he does not understand what I do during a day. I think I do fight justice. Then I realize who I'm fighting for sometimes and think, I'm not really doing that. And this really is what my office looks like. It's just paper explosion everywhere. My assistant is overwhelmed sometimes when she comes into my office because I really just write all day. My nephew, who I can't remember if he goes here or Utah, at the University of Utah, but he came into my house the other day and was complaining because he had to go home and write a 5-page paper. And I didn't say this to him, but I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to write a 5-page paper like every morning. I mean, that's what, like I have a brief due at the end of the day, anywhere between 5 and 15 pages. And if I have time, I could spend hours and hours and hours on those 5 to 15 pages, but that's mostly what I do. I am in court quite frequently, but I'm definitely not in court more than I am just sitting in front of my computer, being on the phone, researching. There's a lot of research. You'd be amazed at how many databases and things attorneys use to look up case law so that we can analyze our specific fact patterns and try to convince a judge to rule one way or another based on what other judges have done before. So,
Stacy, can I ask a question about, so what is a typical day or a typical week like for you? How much time do you spend writing briefs or arguing or meeting with clients? Or?
So it really depends on, and this is just a litigation, so a purely litigation schedule. a litigator schedule, and one that does commercial litigation, because criminal law attorneys are in court pretty frequently. They can spend days in the court. They usually have anywhere between 100 to 200 cases and spend most of that time walking their files around the courthouse. And then, like I said, transactional attorneys never at court. They're just basically in front of their desk, reviewing documents, making sure that things are the way they're supposed to be so that they never come to me as a litigator. So my day depends totally on what's going on. If I'm in trial, then I kiss my husband goodbye 2 days before trial, and I catch up with him when it's over. So he's in charge of my kids and my family, and I really could not do it without him. I don't know how many litigators could do it without their partners, because I could have a 3-week trial. I had a 3-week trial in Idaho last summer. I came home, my 8-year-old's birthday was that day. He said, I want a bunny. I said, of course you can have a bunny, because why not have a bunny? Because the mom's been gone for 3 weeks. So that, and my life is just that when I'm in trial. When I'm not in trial, a day would typically be getting to the office or going straight to court. Courts usually start first thing in the morning or right after lunch. So it would either be going straight to court or straight to the office. If I'm at the office, like I said, I'm writing briefs, answering phone calls, meeting with clients. So yesterday, for example, I was booked solid from 1:30 to 5 at every half-hour increment, meeting with either clients that I have right now or potential clients. I honestly can't remember what I did yesterday morning. I think I had court. I think I was in court yesterday morning. Yeah, and then on a day, like if I had a big brief, so Monday this week, I had a big brief due, and so I had blocked off my calendar so that I could spend most of my day doing that. I sometimes have to turn my do not disturb on my phone so that I don't get interrupted, so I can really focus on writing, because I think I had like a 15 or 16 page brief that I had to write that day. So, and I'm a bit of a procrastinator, so it makes for a difficult life. I wish I was better. I wish I was better at that, because I should have spent 3 hours, 3 days in a row writing my brief, and I didn't. I drive my assistant insane. But yeah, so my typical work hours are, again, depending on my schedule. I would love to say they were like 9 to 5, 9 to 6, but in reality, because I give my clients my cell phone number, again, another mistake, I feel like I'm pretty much on call anytime. And I'm basically in the office until about 6. That also is dependent on where you're practicing and what type of practice you have. So when you first come out of law school, if you decide to be a litigator, or really either side, but you go into a big firm, you're going to be billing probably anywhere between 2,000 and probably 2,000 and 2,400 hours a year, which I know might not sound a lot, but attorneys bill at 6-minute increments. So all day long, I have to keep track of my day. So if I'm talking on the phone for 12 minutes to a client, I have to talk to so-and-so for 12 minutes. If I'm writing a brief for 3 hours, write brief, research, whatever, for 3 hours. If I go to lunch, that's not work. That's just me eating. So that doesn't count for my hours. If I'm doing this, or if I'm doing, pro bono work, that doesn't count either. So I like to volunteer. It makes me feel better about myself if I'm doing things for people who really need services and can't afford them and are in bad places in their life. That doesn't count. So it's a lot of work, and you can vary your schedule depending on what kind of practice you have. I have close friends who have their own practice and have a lot more flexibility in how many clients they have, how their work-life balance works. Some people are just better at balancing work-life. I'm not that great at it.
Why do you do it? It sounds like there's
I know.
ton of stuff.
I knew you were going to ask me that.
But it's like, when does the positive stuff come in?
So it's funny, I knew, I told my assistant Shauna this morning that I wanted to like lay it out how it really is to be a lawyer, but I felt like there was a lot of negativity in it. I would say the good parts about the law are, like I said, I get to do new things all the time. And I am helping people through some of the most difficult parts of their life. Especially when you're working with like closely held businesses, or if you're doing, for example, a criminal case or a divorce case, or you know, a case where this is all they have, and you are trying to save their livelihood. I have a client that I've developed a very good relationship. She started a company in her 20s. She's been growing this company for the last 25 years. That's the case I had in Idaho for 3 weeks. And I wanted to save her company for her. I wanted to do it. I wanted to do some good. It's also very, if you're into sort of analyzing things, and the law draws, especially litigation, draws a lot of competitors, people who, you know, want to win. There's all that angle as well. There's a lot of adrenaline going. I like being in court. I like that whole aspect as well. I like prepping for a hearing. I like presenting it. I like to see if I can do my best. I like to see if I'm better than the other side. You have to really want it. You have to really want it. But that kind of goes to you guys analyzing what you want to do, period. Mm-hmm. Right? Because there's people like me who are interested in that part of their life, right? Analyzing. I don't mean to say that we use our brains more than other people, but really thinking through problems. I mean, I deal with problems all day long. All day long I deal with problems. And I like that part. I like solving problems. I like the way my firm is set up. It's very collegial. We work as a team. You know, we solve problems as a team. We work together to solve problems. And so that to me is the good part, is the good part of the law. But it is hard, and I wouldn't want to come up here and tell you it was just amazing, because I would be selling a line. It's just a stressful atmosphere, and so sometimes when you're under high amounts of stress, you're never your best self when you're under a high amount of stress. And so there's different times, and I always kind of just shake it off when I'm working with attorneys who are kind of ornery, because I think, okay, this is like one of 50 cases they have, and something's going on somewhere. And so I'm not gonna like let it affect me too much. I try really hard. I also think that, I mean, my nature is that we can agree to disagree, right? I don't have to agree with your position. I don't have to, just because you're doing your best. It's my job to advocate for my client. It's your job to advocate for your client. And so there's no point in like, I hate you, you know, things. But that, I mean, some attorneys are different. If you're on the other side, they hate you. But I really do enjoy the practice of law. I like doing what I do. I do feel like I'm doing good, even when I'm doing things that are like, you know, very business based. You have a hard time sometimes seeing that you're doing the best thing for the world as a whole, which is why I do pro bono work, because then I feel like I'm doing good for the world as a whole. But you are doing things, and you're making sure that the law is followed. And especially at a time like this, when there's so much chaos everywhere, I mean, it is good to know that there's a whole, you know, a whole group of people whose sole job is to make sure that the law is followed. So the question is sort of, I don't know, how the areas of the law that you can go into after, you know, not just being a lawyer. I have no interest in politics at all. I do think that people with a law degree or political science degree have some knowledge that not people who act in other areas don't have. So I think it's definitely a good thing to have for our politicians, although I'm not saying that, you know, other professions can't be lawyers. after you go to law school, you can really do anything. There's many people who do not practice law. By that I mean they're not in the courtroom or not using their bar license to do anything. They're working in human resources, they're running companies. So you can definitely take that track. I think when I first started, I remember was considering law school, someone said to me, it's kind of like really a general degree, and it would be good for a lot of areas. There's many lawyers who are, CEOs of companies or whatever. And I do think that is partially true. I personally think it's a lot of money to spend to get sort of a broad general degree, so I'm not sure I totally think that that's the best use of your time. But as far as being a judge, you have to practice for a certain number of years. I think typically to be on the state court bench, you have to have practiced for at least 7, it might be 9. Some of the justice courts, so if anyone's got a ticket in Taylorsville, the judges usually don't have to have been practicing for so long. I am interested in that. I don't know that I'll actually do it. There is politics involved that I don't know that I have like the stomach for. But I was listening to some of our judges speak, and they were saying that being a judge is like its own job, and that sounds kind of silly, of course, that being a judge is a job, but it's a different way of practicing because they are actually determining what the law is. Whereas I'm trying to convince someone what the law is. So I think that would be interesting. I'm definitely interested in that. I don't know that I'll actually do it though. Yeah, so I have a paralegal. I have 2 paralegals in my office who I say are my right and my left hand. One of them has a paralegal degree and one of them does not. She just worked her sort of way up through the field, but they do everything for trial prep. They help me get exhibits ready. They help me do some legal research. They help me do briefing, motions, memorandum, orders, things like that for the court. There's legal assistants. My legal assistant saves my life every single day. And I don't know, I wish she would be my assistant outside of the office as well. But I did that for a year before law school, and I really enjoyed that. Again, you're doing a lot of you're really the backbone of any sort of law firm. There's also areas of the law, but more leaning towards social work, which was one of my undergraduate degrees. So, we have probation officers, we have law clerks that work for the judges, we have, people who work with juveniles, criminal justice type things. So all of that as well. I don't know, does anyone have any specific questions about areas of the law that you can get into? I say just go to law school, but that's me. What do you guys, you guys are studying business? Is that right? So a business degree is a great degree for law school, especially if you want to go into commercial litigation like myself, or if you want to do transactional stuff. I wish I would have done a joint MBA JD. They do have that program at BYU and the University of Utah, because my undergraduate degree was a little, the softer sciences, sociology and social work, which helps me a lot in the counseling aspect of law, but it doesn't help me so much in understanding of balance sheet, balance sheet, profit and loss. I had to teach that myself. So I think that you guys taking business classes, if you're interested in pursuing a law degree, will only be to your benefit for sure.
What was your first time, think way far back before you started law school, before you started getting into this stuff, how did you get there? What made you go, actually, I can do this, and put yourself through that?
Oh, that's a really good question, because I don't think I really ever had that thought, quite frankly. Mm-hmm. But I do remember when I thought about going. I can't remember if Whitney was doing this with me at the time, but I did this program called Take Back the Night, which was against it was basically against student rape on campus and talking about all those date rape issues. And I remember I had to speak for a radio station to talk about, the event that we were coordinating. And the other person there was an attorney. And I remember after the meeting, he said to me, "You should go to law school. What are you going to do?" And I thought, I can't go to law school. I don't have any family that's attorneys. Like, I know nothing about the law. That's just crazy talk. And I think I laughed. I thought that was the most absurd thing I'd ever heard. And then I just kind of sat with me, and I thought, why not? Why couldn't I go to law school? There's nothing stopping me from going to law school. I don't have anything that says I can't go. Like I said, my GPA was not great. My GPA was crap, actually. I'm the weirdest person in the world who did better in law school than they did in undergrad, better in undergrad than high school.
Schooling system, so I understand it.
Yeah, I definitely like the challenge, that's for sure. But I guess that's the first thing. And then after I graduated from undergrad, like I said, I had a degree that you have to go to graduate school if you're going to have a sociology degree.
You have to follow through.
So I knew that I was going to go to grad school, didn't know what I was going to do, and that's when I worked for legal defenders, and I just got interested in it and thought, and it was always like, I'll just take the LSAT.
Yeah.
And then I did fine. And then I thought, I'll just apply.
I'll just take the LSAT.
Yeah.
Well, she's already at that point where she could take it, so she might as well,
Yeah. I studied. I did not just walk in. My closest friend I met at my LSAT study class. But I definitely get your point. So I took I studied, took the LSAT. But I didn't take the LSAT knowing this is what I was going to do. I took the LSAT, what score am I going to get? And is it going to be good enough to get into law school? And then when I got my LSAT grade, I thought, I don't know. And then I did what I just described to you. I applied to a bunch of schools, got in, and then I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I'll go to law school. So I picked which school. I ended up picking the U, went to the U, and then even then, I'm like the worst case study.
You described it as like really, really tough. So what kept you in?
I did not think law school, I didn't mean to make it sound like law school was really tough. I really did consider law school like a 9-to-5 job. And so I did not find law school to be horrifying. I thought it was, I studied, I took it seriously. I felt like I'm not working. At the time, my husband was working, so he was putting me through school, and I felt like he's putting me through school. I'm not going to, throw this opportunity away. And so I really did study, and I really took my exam seriously, but I didn't think it was horrible. I met my closest friends in law school.
How old were you when you went to graduate school?
So I started, I only took 1 year off. So when do you graduate? 21?
21.
So I graduated from undergrad at 21, and then I took a year off. So I started law school when I was 23 and graduated when I was 25-ish. So yeah, but law school is not terrible. I hope I didn't make it seem like that. It's fun. I think you just have to have really blunt conversations and really hard conversations. I like to have those because I just kind of speak really bluntly, and I appreciate that in others. But you always have to walk the line. I had a client come in to me the other day, and they were fighting over $15,000, and $15,000 is a lot of money to me. It's not that I don't understand that, but I can't afford myself. So I couldn't say, I told them, you should not hire an attorney, you should do X, Y, Z, because it's not, there's a dollar amount that makes using attorneys the way our system is set up right now. I try to have the conversations early enough to make that not happen. I try to see the writing on the walls. I know that that's sometimes hard for attorneys and the clients. At the end of the day, the client has the say, and if I've educated the client, I've had a client say, I don't care how much I pay Stacy as long as I win this case, because he had like some ethical dilemma with the other guy. But for most people, I just have those conversations so that we don't have that situation, because that would make me really uncomfortable.